All right, you ready? Cool. Great. Welcome. I think I almost know everyone or met some of you. We have friends and family. My name is Marcus Essien. I'm one of the program coordinators, or the program coordinator, I'm not sure, at Flower City Art Center, and welcome to Visual Voices. Today we have Rob Bell. Before I get into his brief intro, I do want to let you know we have a sign up here if you're not already on our mailing list. But then also we have a second year wonderful program, the Odyssey Project, which is for war veterans in photography. So if that's something that you have people that you know or are interested in that program, please let us know. Set your phones to vibrate, please. It's always wrong. But this is fun. This is our second one in the series. And I will read the bio that you gave me, Rob. Rob Bell has been a professional writer for the last 10 years, most recently serving as a community journalist, photographer, and editor for our very own Democrat and Chronicle here. And he's won both state and local awards for that. He's also an educator and co-curator of downtown Rochester's Behind the Glass Photography Gallery. Rob enjoys spending time with his family and documenting urban landscapes through street photography. And if you ever get a chance to take his classes, I highly recommend it. I got a chance to take one of his classes. And if you ever want to talk about movies, he's the one to do it with. With that, here is Rob Bell.
Thank you for having me. I'm dressed like this because I actually DJ'd an event at a coffee shop this morning. They were running and they came back. I didn't run though, so I still don't know why I have on running shorts, but I just wanted to stick with the theme. Thanks everybody for coming. Hopefully this is just be a cool conversation. It's the first time I've ever really done this, talk about my process and what goes into a lot of what I've done over the last 5-6 years. So I'll kind of get right into it. It's really informal. If anybody wants to blurt out a question or anything, feel free. Hopefully it's, like I said, just an easy talk. I named this talk Art is Life. I'll get into that concept in a minute, but I want to start with what I think is my favorite photo that I've ever taken. And I think it starts off the story that I want to tell pretty well. I've called it Stranger on a Train. This is actually shot this photo outside of an Amtrak train window as it was traveling from New York City to Rochester. My mom always tells me to make sure that I ask the what are they called? The porters. What side the Hudson River is going to be on, because the view is just breathtaking. So when I used to take the train back and forth from Philly to Rochester, I would make sure once I crossed over in New York City that I would get on the Hudson side so I could see that view. And there was one particular time that I was coming from Philadelphia to Rochester where I was feeling kind of down. I was born here in Rochester, but I left when I was about 3 months old. I grew up in Philadelphia. Philadelphia was my home. I spent most of my childhood, all my childhood, most of my adult life there. I was really attached to that city, and things happened in life where suddenly I had to relocate suddenly, and I felt myself almost grieving, like it was a death almost. And I can say that coming to Rochester felt like death. I didn't know anything about Rochester. I was 3 months when I left, right? So it was more like I was going into the unknown, and I just wasn't sure. It's about a 13-hour ride from Philly to Rochester, once you switch over to New York and all the stops. So I had a lot of time to think. And I had my camera on me, and I looked out the window, and this was a sign of reassurance that everything was gonna be okay. So outside of just the composition, which I think I nailed to my own horn, it was just a good visual reminder that that better things were ahead, and that kind of was confirmed with everything that happened really after I took this picture. It's funny, I did not consider myself a photographer at this point. I had a camera, I was experimenting, but this was really one of the photos that once I got here, I kind of dove deep into photography as a hobby. So let me get into who I am. Marcus introduced me. Thank you for that a little bit. Like I said, my name is Rob. I am a father, a brother, a son, a godfather, a friend. When people ask me what I do, I always lead with that because to me that is more important than photographer, writer, all that other stuff that I could introduce as. And I think it's the basis of the humanity that I try to lead with when I create. I've been bouncing around this idea lately of art is life, meaning that the creation process doesn't just happen when you decide you're gonna go out on a photo walk or you paint or you do poetry or anything. Art and creation is kind of always happening. Sometimes I meet fellow artists and they say, I haven't shot in a while, I haven't written in a while, I'm stuck. And lately, I never really get stuck. And I don't say that to say that I have all these ideas. What I tell my friends when they tell me that is, you're probably just not experiencing enough, you're not living enough, right? I've been fortunate to live in some different places. I lived in Southern California for a couple of years, I lived in Chicago for a couple of years. I've had a lot of experiences, and I think all of that has shaped me into the photographer and the writer that I am today. And living really is the creation, right? So when I go out and I try to identify with things when I'm doing street photography, it's not just that moment that I see something, it's everything that kind of leads into my intuition and what I'm thinking about, and really my whole life. And I know that's kind of deep and existential, but hopefully I can get into some of my work now and kind of share what I mean by that. So before I get into that, I want to talk about that theory a little deeper. And it's my belief that we are all artists. I think we all have grown up creating, playing when we're kids. It's just some of us stay in the sandbox a little too long. I'm one of those people that kept creating. But I think everybody is an artist, really. And I think the thing that separates people that they call artists from, people who are creative but don't practice is really these 4 E's, right? First is expression. I think we all want to express ourselves. We have the need to express ourselves. I think, going to a therapist is something people do to express themselves. Going to a bar is something people do to express themselves, right? People talk to their barber, to their nail techs, that group chat you have with friends and family. I mean, all of that is a part of expression. I think we all have that. So it starts with that need to just express yourself. Me, I've never been great at expressing myself just by talking about my feelings. So art has always been that way of getting out that expression, right? The second E is really the effort. And I think that's the thing that separates people who call themselves artists or are called artists. Just that effort of going out to buy the canvas, to buy the camera, to say I'm going on the photo walk today, right? So it's one thing to have the idea and need to express, but it's another thing to kind of make the commitment to get out there and put effort into your art. And then the scary E is the thing that most people don't want to do, and that's the exhibition. Eventually you have to show it, right? When I was in film school, I had a great professor who would always say, don't create inside jokes. When I was a young artist, that's pretty much all I did, was come up with stuff that only I understood. And I think his words were, if you're going to share your art with people, you have to connect, right? So it's not just enough to say, oh, I feel this, and I think this way, and I'm the only one that this matters to. I really do think the exhibition part is dedicating yourself to sharing that art with someone. And then that leads to emotion, which hopefully your art evokes out of people. So those 3 E's are something that I think that if you can instill them, then you yourself can be an artist. So I'll talk about me a little bit now. I think my photography story starts with Chicago. When I was 17 years old, when I was leaving Philly and decided I wanted to go to school, it was my dream to go to Temple University. That is the school in Philly, and I went on a tour, and I'm like, I want to stay home. I want to go to Temple. I did not have the SAT go to Temple. And I did not get in. I was pretty heartbroken by that process. I was going to go for sports management out of all things, right? But I've always had this love of movies, this love of imagery. And I thought about going to film school, but when you're young, especially when you grow up in the city and you don't know anybody that has ever done that to make a living, there are not a lot of people who say, yeah, go to film school, be an artist. It's like, no, you should probably go get a job, right? So I listened to that up until the moment I didn't get into Temple. And I used that as an opportunity to find an art school that I wanted to go to. And I found this great school in Chicago, Columbia College, Chicago. And I went there for film and video. And once I got to film school, I was exposed to a genre of films called the French New Wave. These are films that were made in the 50s and 60s in France by independent filmmakers. These screenshots right here are from one of my favorite films from the French New Wave. It's called The 400 Blows by Francois Truffaut. And the signature of the French New Wave was kind of lo-fi filmmaking almost. A lot of handheld filmmaking, a lot of shooting in the streets, a lot of using actors and actresses who weren't professionals but just lived in those areas and lived those experiences. This film is about a young boy who kind of comes of age in Paris, and I just fell in love with this genre of film from the beginning because it wasn't like that Hollywood polished kind of stuff that you see in the theaters, right? It was a documentary style narrative filmmaking, but really felt like you were just watching slices of life. People in the background looking at the camera. I think you can see these people right here looking at the camera, right? Because it wasn't these big crews, it wasn't sets. They were actually in the streets. They were actually out getting these real places and these things. And I also fell in love with just how they made Paris look. Shots like this with the Eiffel Tower in the background, or these kind of brick facades with people in them and such. So the French New Wave kind of just filled my brain with this imagery that I always wanted to emulate. So I want to say about 15 years later, kind of around the time when I took the Stranger on the Train picture, I got a chance to go back to Chicago. And this time I brought my camera with me. And it was one of the sets of photos that really made me believe that, well, I won't say made me believe I was a photographer. What it did was it just immersed me. It made this connection that I like to talk about the inspiration and what I could put out into the world. I like to think that the French New Wave started, when I first started shooting photography, it was all black and white. But I like to say that the French New Wave really kind of got me in that mode to shoot. This is my favorite shot from that set. I love architecture. I love shapes. I love the way cityscapes kind of paint themselves up against other landscapes. Different buildings in the background, the wire going across the foreground. Just, to me, cities are like collages almost, and I like the way they are designed. It gives me calm to kind of find those spots where you can turn just a simple building at a certain angle almost into a fine art piece. So I walked around Chicago for hours on that trip and just snapped away. This shot in the middle is almost like that first shot from the 400 Blows with the young boy at the beach. But I just remember falling in love with photography on this trip. Just really getting my eye in certain places where, it felt comfortable for me and it felt like movie scenes. I think that's what I was looking for. I wanted to create shots that felt like you were watching a still from a movie. So Chicago, to me, a lot of people say New York is the best city for street photography. I love Chicago. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's this mix of green space and architecture and art and culture. And New York is cool, but it's a little chaotic. There's a little bit more elegance to Chicago, almost in that Paris way. So that's why I love capturing that city. And this is a set that, again, kind of just immersed me more and more into taking photos. So let's take a step back a little bit in my story. So before I got that camera that I took a lot of those shots with, I want to go back to 2017. This is 2 years after I graduated from film school, a second film school that I went to, because that school that I went to in Chicago, I did not graduate from. I ended up transferring. And I finished my degree program at a film school in California, and that was about 2015. Came back home to Philadelphia, and on my birthday in 2017, my family got a call that my Uncle Ted was in pretty bad shape and that he was dying. So we had to fly out to the Bay Area to kind of be there for the family while he was dying. That was a pretty rough time, but it was the first time that I had seen all of my family on that side, on my mother's side, together all at once in about 20 years. A lot of estranged parties got together, a lot of cousins I hadn't seen, a lot of uncles I hadn't seen. So, you know, it's this weird thing that happens with funerals and deaths where there's this dichotomy between life and death. You're mourning people, but at the same time, it's almost like a family reunion. It's this weird contrast that you feel. And at this point, I really wasn't into photography. I was still, you know, I graduated with a degree in screenwriting, so I was more of a writer at this time. But something compelled me to just take a lot of pictures on this trip. And when I look back at my photo album sometimes, and I've never shared these photos before, but when I look back through my photo albums to find pictures for things I'm doing now, I always come across this set and think about it as like the genesis of me as a photographer. And taking a lot of these shots with my cell phone. Really wasn't thinking about composition or any of that stuff. It was just capturing moments. The reason why I decided to show it, I think it goes back to those 4 E's, right? I wasn't trying to be an artist. I was just trying to express something at the time, making the effort to constantly pull the phone out. I guess the exhibition part is what I'm doing right now with them. But at the time, I really just wanted to save these moments in time. These are some of my cousins right here. This is my uncle's casket. He was in the Vietnam War. This is my uncle's son, my cousin Derek, who I look at this picture and I think about how, well, first I think about how strong he was during that process, right? He was losing his father. He was having a lot of emotions at the time. And I think about the moment where he decided to, like I said in the beginning, become a kid again. Started to play with chalk. And it was just an expressive moment. I don't know if you can see it, but he wrote, I think this says, "I will see you again," or "we will see you again." I love this picture of my cousin because I think it just catches him in a moment that I remember. Like I said, it's this weird balance between strength and joy and loss and playfulness. And I just really admire that moment, those moments that we shared during that time. Couple more photos. That's my grandmother, my brother. As you can see, like I said, my cousin was a little all over the place. But that was a natural moment. I think that was right after the funeral where us cousins were all together. And it's weird, right? I mean, he pulled out a bottle of vodka. I'm sure he had a lot of emotion he was trying to get off. But again, I don't think that there's any other period in my phone where I took so many photos. And just asking myself why, I was trying to express something at that time. Personally, in my life, it was a transition period. I was fresh out of school, trying to figure out what the next step was. It's not like you get a film degree and there's a job waiting for you. Anybody that's ever been to school for something in the arts knows you kind of have to figure out your way through that. And I was very much in that period at this point, just trying to figure stuff out, which led me to do something very weird when I was out there. We were out there for like 3 weeks, like a whole month, right? Because when we got there, you know, it was a process when my uncle died. He was in the hospital for a long time. Having family all together, I think felt good, so people stayed longer than you might think. I got bored. I got bored, and one day we were in Walmart for something else, and I bought some toy cars and a fisheye lens for my cell phone, and I just went in the backyard and just started doing weird shit. Just taking photos of toy cars. But again, it was like something was creeping up, right? Something was creeping up that there's something that I'm trying to get out here. And that's what I think about when I look at these photos. It's like those first baby steps of just experimenting and, you know, trying to capture things and get some of that emotion out of my head. So I think that's when photography really started to bud for me a little bit. So fast forward. Let me go back to this picture because it's an important detail that I missed. So while we were in California, I got a call from an independent producer in LA who got my name from an intern that I went to school with, who told him that I was a pretty good writer. He wanted to pitch a pilot to networks for a TV show starring somebody on SNL, which, even though there's a lot of people in here, I signed an NDA and then she's filming it, so I'm not gonna say who it was. But this indie producer was cheap and did not want to pay an established writer to do this work. So he was looking for somebody fresh out of school to write it that he can get cheap. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I just, you know, I wanted some money. It seemed like a good opportunity. So he was gonna pay me $3,500 to write this script. At that time, I'm like, oh shit, that's a lot of money. So I took the job, and I think he gave me $2,000 up front. And when I got back to Philly, I didn't know what I was gonna do with the money, but I decided that I was gonna buy a camera. And I bought my first camera, the camera that I still use today. It was a Sony a6300. And I did about 5 days worth of research on it because I didn't want to waste $2,000. But I found out that this camera had a sensor that would allow me to take photography in really low light situations where I didn't need artificial lighting, which is something that I don't like. So not only did I have this kind of creative curiosity come out of all this emotion on this California trip, but I got the opportunity that led to me buying my camera in that same trip. So it's a very significant trip when it comes to that. So fast forward, I have this camera now. I know it's like a Tarantino movie. I'm skipping all over the place when it comes to the timeline. So I got my camera now. I took my train ride to Rochester. I'm in Rochester, I got my camera. I did a lot of street photography in those early days, let's say 2019, 2020. I didn't know if I was gonna stay here. I didn't think I was gonna stay here in Rochester. I didn't know what I was gonna do at that time. I just knew that I liked having that camera in my hand, and everywhere I went during that period of my life, I took it with me. Up until September 5th, and I will explain this, I pretty much would just go to the public market. I would go downtown. I would go anywhere where people were, cool architecture, and take photos. I really never documented anything at that point. Then 2020 happened, and I don't have to get into a soliloquy about 2020. We all experienced it. COVID, George Floyd happened. Locally here in Rochester, we had the Daniel Prude situation. And if you don't know who Daniel Prude is, he was a 40-year-old black man who died in Rochester in March 2020 after an encounter with the police after experiencing a mental health crisis. Even though he died in 2020, people didn't find out about it until September of that year. So this was, even though his death happened before George Floyd, the way the timing worked out is that locally people didn't find out about it until after that. People were already upset, and we had nights of demonstrations. I'm pretty sure if you're from here, you were here, you remember that. September 5th was maybe the worst night out of all that. It was a Sunday night. And ironically, me and my family were preparing to get out of town to go to a resort that was letting people come toward the tail end of that year in COVID because people were going crazy and pulling their hair out, whatever. My brother, I saw the news cut in, and these demonstrations were happening downtown, and my first instinct was to grab my camera and go document it. My brother didn't want me to go because he was like Chevy Chase on National Lampoon's Vacation, just trying to get out of town the next day on time. I think my mom was afraid of all what could happen if I went, so I remember her not wanting me to go. But I remember feeling incredibly compelled to go down there with my camera and just document things. So that is what I did. When I look back at these photos, I'm not incredibly proud of them because, you know, underexposed in some places. I would have did a much better job if I was more seasoned at that time, but they do invoke a lot of emotion. That was a wild night. It's the first time I got tear gas in my eyes was documenting this. The one thing that I remember more than anything about taking these photos is constantly questioning whether or not I should have been there in the first place. It's not easy to document pain, which is something that I would come to learn as my career, you know, progressed. But at this point, I had never felt it before, right? People were upset, and I think the last thing somebody upset wants is a camera in their face. And I just remember feeling very conflicted about that, like whether or not I was being, whether or not I had a purpose there, or whether or not I was being exploitive of the situation. I rested on a quote or a conversation that I read about James Baldwin when he was having the same kind of questions about himself during the Civil Rights Movement. He was friends with Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, and these people had defined spaces in that movement of what they did. And, you know, James Baldwin was like, I'm just a writer, what do I do here? And he finally realized that his job was to be the witness, because somebody had to be the witness. Somebody had to accurately document what was going on. So in that moment, that's when I decided that I wasn't going to try to get the picture of, you know, somebody screaming or crying or, you know, going through trauma, but to just really focus my camera on plainly what was happening, which was a lot at the time. And I remember putting these photos on Instagram and getting some good feedback from them. It's the first time that I was introduced to some of the photography, you know, circle that I have here in Rochester, was when I posted these photos. So I'm like, okay, people online think they're pretty good. I wanted to do something with them, and I decided that I was going to send them into the Democrat and Chronicle. I didn't know how that process worked. I was just sending photos. To be honest with you, I didn't even think that they were going to write me back. It was a shot in the dark. Here are these 10 photos or wherever I sent. I wrote a little background about, you know, I was born here and I'm doing photography now. And if you feel compelled to publish these, do so, or something silly like that, right? A couple days later, I got an email back from Mike Killian, who is the executive director still at the Democratic Chronicle. And I'm like, oh, wow, he wrote me back. And I like to say that it was the equivalent of get out of here, kid. Because he said, we don't do that. I think that's what he said. We don't publish photos from people, but, you know, check back in a year. The news business is volatile right now, so there's no money to hire anybody. Check back in a year, kid. Maybe, you know, look at your portfolio kind of thing. Usually at that point in my life, that would have been it. I was used to rejection, and it kind of forced me into a hole a little bit. But there was something about 2020 where I wasn't going to take no for an answer. So I wrote back and I said, well, I'm not looking for a job or any opportunity or anything. I just think these photos need to be seen, sir. Basically what I said to him. So he wrote me back and he said, okay, well, if you feel that way, why don't you write an op-ed, you know? And I still think that that was like a get out of here kid, because I didn't present myself as a writer, but he didn't know. Oh, you want me to write something too? Okay. A day on that trip, I drove some of the way. We drove all the way to South Carolina because people still weren't flying like that. And there was this one day on the trip where I straddled like a piece of metal that was on the highway, and I completely wrecked our rental car. And we had to pull over to the side of the road and get a tow truck, and the tow truck had to take the van to the nearest airport to bring us another truck. It was a whole big thing, and I felt horrible about it because I felt like I was ruining our vacation. And something weird happened in that space while we were waiting for the tow truck to come. I felt the same shame almost that I felt when I was taking the photos, because when he told me to write an op-ed, I didn't know what I was going to write about at first, but that's when I came to the conclusion that this is going to be about that thought process as far as whether or not I should be here or not, and whether or not media exploits trauma, right? There is a thing called third-party trauma, and it happens a lot for especially black and brown people, especially in situations like this. There's a term called trauma porn. At that time, I mean, how many times did they show that George Floyd video? It was just on a loop. It was repeat. So those are the kind of feelings I was having, whether or not media was actually a good thing during things like this. And I sent it in, and they published it like 3-4 days later. It was a very exciting thing to get an essay in the paper at that time. But what I didn't know was that a day after that Mike would offer me a job at the Democratic Chronicle. They had money now. So we had this position called cultural trends, a cultural trends reporter, where we want to, in 2020, everybody wanted to do the right thing, so to speak. They wanted to create stories about marginalized communities where that didn't involve crime, that didn't involve trauma, so to speak. What about the story of, the aunt on the corner in the 19th Ward who was doing this great thing for people, but nobody knows who she is? Find me that kind of person, that kind of thing. Didn't go to journalism school, never wanted to be a journalist, never even thought about being a photographer, but suddenly I had this opportunity to do video, photos, and write. Might not have been movies, but I had an opportunity to be published and to get my work out there and to move out of my mom's. So that was cool too. So this weird kind of chain reaction led to me becoming a journalist. I started in November of 2020, right after the election when Biden won, and it was an interesting time to be in the news business. So that takes me to kind of my first win that I like to say. Maybe not my first win, but I'll call it my first win. So let's fast forward 2 years. I've been working at the paper about 2 years now. And my daughter was born in March of 2022 here in Rochester. So I had about 6 weeks off for paternity leave. And her mother, my partner, her sister was getting married down in Philly. And they asked me to be the photographer. When I said no, that's not what I do. I don't do wedding photography. If you ever been to a wedding, the photographer is the guy who is like the maestro. He's supposed to do all the posing and everything. And I'm like, I just let y'all know, I don't know how to do any of that. I'm a candid photographer, maybe a news photographer, I call myself at this point, but that's not what I do. But of course, the free option is the option that everybody wants, and this was gonna be our wedding gift to them. So I decided to do it. And as I was fumbling and bubbling through trying to pose the bride for the pictures that she's going to live with for the rest of her life, one of the groomsmen shouted out, "He's not a real photographer!" I can laugh at that now, but it really hurt my feelings when it happened. I'm like, damn, that was mean. He had no idea that I had made this speech before I came here, that I can't do what you're asking me to do, right? He probably thought I was getting paid thousands of dollars to do this horrible job. So it really stunted my confidence, because at the time I really didn't consider myself a photographer. I knew I was a good writer, but this photography thing was something that I was just coming along to, and it was a really big passion for me at the time. So that sat with me for about the next 2 weeks. It was just running on a loop in my head. When suddenly, when I get off of paternity leave, I get my first assignment, which is, we want you to take the next 10 days and cover Jazz Fest every day. Okay. I guess, new guy comes back, he gets the shit assignment. That's what I was thinking at the time, right? But the cool thing was that Jazz Festival had been away for 2 years. They didn't have it in 2020 or 2021 because of the pandemic. So in 2022, there were like tons of free shows because the Jazz Festival had this grant that they got out of COVID where they were able to offer like mostly free shows. So I don't think there's been a Jazz Festival like that since, because downtown, I'd only been here 3 years at that point, and downtown was just flooded with people everywhere. It was amazing to see. I also love jazz music. I grew up in a house where it was played all the time, so I had a connection to that. So when I got out there and I decided, okay, if this is my assignment for 10 days, what was playing in my head was, you're not a real photographer, you're not a real photographer. And in the beginning, I was sensitive about it. Maybe I'm not. But the more I heard it, the more I got agitated. And I'm like, I'm gonna show this motherfucker. But I decided to lean into what I knew I was good at, and that was I wanted to catch candid moments. I wanted to catch the kind of moments that I felt when I was in California with my family. That's what I wanted to focus on. So I made the conscious decision when I got there. They put you in the pit with all the other photographers, right? And everybody is taking photos of everything that's on stage, right? We're all getting the same shot. And I just found myself being in that pit that first day, like, this sucks. It's gonna be like 15 different photos of this same thing. So while we're all facing this way and who's supposed to be on stage, I just decided to turn around and start shooting the people who were enjoying the jazz festival. And it just became a thing of its own. One day after another, it was just, who are the people in Rochester? I really didn't know. Everybody was in the house during the pandemic. I was new. This was my introduction to what Rochester really was. I forget his name, and I wish I could, but he was the first guy that I wrote a story on when I covered the festival that year. He was a security guard. I started talking to him, and he told me that he was a single dad, and he worked 3 jobs to make sure that his kids were gonna have a good Christmas that year. And I'm like, you think about Christmas in June? He said, yeah, I got to, man. He said, I've been working all day, this is my 3rd job. And I was just like, I just had my daughter, and I'm like, that's a dad right there. So I had to tell his story. Again, emotional, right? Just had my daughter, seeing a daughter on her dad's shoulders, really caught my eye. This guy, wasn't part of the Jazz Festival. They didn't book him, but he was rocking. He was rocking. So talked to him, got his story, got a little bit about, why he was out there. Just, loving to play that guitar, wanting people to hear it, happy to be outside for the first time in a while. You might recognize that guy to the far right, Sean Dunwoody, one of the best artists in this city. behind the, if you're familiar with Jazz Festival, it's like a sidewalk that had notes on it right here. And when people cross the street, you know, you can kind of hear the notes. So it's kind of like this living, breathing kind of public art thing. A skateboarder right here, right? You know, for him, everybody was in his way because he would come town and practice, and during the pandemic, he had the city all to himself. But when Jazz Fest happened, it's like everybody, you know, kind of encroached on him. But one of my favorite shots, he was a cool dude. And then I did get some shots of people on stage. Like I said, I do love jazz. So I also had fun kind of shooting the artist, but I just wanted to do it in a different way. And those hot kind of lights that are on stage can create this silhouette effect that just looks really cool. Again, I always had this push and pull with the paper, right? Because I love doing stuff like this, but they're like, well, we can't see his face. All right, don't use that one or whatever. And I would go back and forth with them about, well, you hired me to do something different, and this is different. But the more and more I started to post these photos, I think this photo album ended up being like 68 photos after those 10 days. And a couple of them in that album were shot by Jamie Germano, who is still a photographer at the DNC. He did all of the Bills coverage for a while. But I had a great time doing this, and it got a lot of good feedback. And about a year later, me and Jamie won a New York News Publishing Association award for this photo album. So it was the first kind of big award that I won for my photography. And to think that the whole time what was going through my head while I was shooting these photos, or you're not a real photographer, was a circular moment for me, and something that kind of cemented that, okay, you know, you might not be able to pose the bride, but you can bring something to this space as a photographer. So I love the 2022 Jazz Fest series for that. Like I said, this is by Bella Bean. She was maybe 6 weeks old when I shot this. They say that Frederick Douglass was one of the most photographed people of his time, and when she was born, I said that I was going to make it my mission to make her the Frederick Douglass of this time. You know, 65 to 70% of my photo album was probably Bella. And it's the reason why I'm showing her photo, because I think a lot of my work after she was born is really tied to who I am as a father. Bella has a brother that I've adopted him. He's my bonus son. His name is Zaid. And Bella is 3 now, Zaid is 5. And, you know, at that time, you know, I was really just getting used to being a dad. And I flash forward to a year later. So this is 2023. Bella is about 1 now. Zaid is 3. And I get this assignment, and sometimes, you know, when you're in journalism, you get assignments because it's just your number. It's your turn, so to speak. Everybody gets a turn. And there was a press conference happening on a Friday we got a press release about a northern border crisis that was happening. And a congresswoman was having a press conference about it, I think at the Homeland Security office and near Irondequoit. And I just happened to it was my turn up. I didn't have an assignment that day, so I got the assignment. But I wasn't used to that kind of coverage. I had just kind of made the transition from community reporter to city government reporter. It was a promotion that I got. I wasn't used to covering stuff like this, but you know, this was gonna be one of my first times. And since my email wasn't on the list for that congresswoman, because I hadn't covered these kind of things before, when the press conference got switched to 2 hours earlier, I didn't get the memo. So when I showed up to the Homeland Security office, knocking on the door, they're like, what do you want? I'm here for the press conference. Are you? Mind you, this is how I dress, okay? I already don't look like the average reporter, right? You know, black guy, dreads, I'm showing up with basketball shorts. They're like, are you sure you're here for the press conference? I got that all the time, and this was one of the days that I got that. It kind of feels embarrassing at times, but you know, from the beginning at my time at DNC, you know, I was just like, I'm gonna be me. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna switch to Dan Rather all of a sudden because y'all offered me a journalism job. I don't have those kind of clothes. This is how I'm showing up. I got my lanyard on. I work here. I don't know what to tell you. But the press secretary for that particular congressman felt so bad that I didn't get that information that she kind of, I wouldn't say latched on to me, but let's just say I got information early from that point on. Now, what was the northern border crisis? So let me try to not to bore you and wrap this up a little bit. So back in 2023, there was a road in Plattsburgh, New York called Roxham Road, where asylum seekers from all over the world, Venezuela, Cuba, Mexico, Uzbekistan, all over the world really would come to the Democratic Republic of Congo. There was a video that went out on social media that showed them how to get to New York City, catch a Greyhound bus to Plattsburgh, New York, and then literally walk, I would say, you know, this is America and that wall is Canada and this is Roxham Road, and you can just walk right in, right? And as long as you got across the border, you could claim asylum. And it was a loophole almost for people to seek asylum in a different country. What struck me at the time was that I think we always look at America as this place that everybody wants to be. And once I started talking to some of the shelters and some of the people near Canada that was working with these families, they're like, no, they don't want to come to America. Like, they see what's going on right here. They want to go to Canada. And I thought that was interesting. So that was the story that I wrote. And because I wrote that story, I kind of got put on the northern border team at that time, I guess. So what we started to hear coming out of Plattsburgh was around April of 2023, Justin Trudeau and Biden came to this agreement that they were going to shut down Roxham Road. And it was some kind of treaty that they made. This wasn't going to be an option anymore for people to seek asylum. But these people who have spent their life savings to make this trip did not find that out until they got to Plattsburgh. So now they're stuck. And what was happening was you have people from all over the world who are stuck in, I hate calling places the middle of nowhere, right? Because, but some places really are the middle of nowhere. Plattsburgh, New York is just not the place to be if you've spent all your money, all your life savings, right? So you have people from all over the world who are stuck in a mini mart that has a Dunkin' Donuts and a sandwich shop in it, trying to figure out what they're going to do for the rest of their life. They have fled their country because of persecution, because of their religion, their sexual orientation. Maybe one of their family members got caught up in some kind of cartel crime or something like that, right? These people are literally fleeing for their lives, and all of a sudden there's this hope that they have of getting out of it, and you get there, you're right at the finish line, you figure out, nah, that's not gonna happen. So you gotta figure out the rest of your life. So as we were starting to hear these reports, the USA Today network decided that they wanted to send 3 people to the border. 2 people from the Journal News, which is in Lower Hudson, Eduardo Cuevas, who is now a breaking news reporter at USA Today. They were gonna send Seth Harrison, who is like a legend down there, as a photographer, and they were gonna send me to do the video. Because I had written myself into this story with my last story that I wrote on this border crisis that was happening. 2 days before we went up there, Seth got sick. So now I was solely responsible for all the visuals, photography and video. That meant that I was going to have to report to a woman named Carrie Yale, who overall I think is lovely. But it's a pretty tough as nails visual editor at the time. And she's very specific about what she wants. And we're on the meeting and she's like, I want you to catch the despair. And I want to see people in the middle of the road with their suitcases and they have nowhere to go. And I'm like, how the hell am I supposed to get that, right? This is not a movie. We're not making this up. I don't know how to put somebody in that situation. How am I supposed to get that? So I was kind of nervous about it because I knew Carrie was going to be very demanding. And I also knew that if they were going to send me 5 hours away for a few days and pay for everything, that they were looking for this to be some kind of national story. So there was some pressure there. And I got there at about, let me see, it might have been like a Wednesday or a Thursday. I got there at like 5 p.m. And I met up with Eduardo, who was a lovely guy. I love Eddie, that's my guy. We kind of talked about our plan, what we was gonna do. And he said the first bus comes in to the mini mart tomorrow morning at 4 a.m. Okay. So I set my alarm for 3:30, we got up. And the first thing we see when we pull up to the mini mart is this family who is sleeping on a bed of rocks outside of the mini mart because the store's not open yet. And even though it was May, it was freezing in Plattsburgh, New York. I mean, completely freezing. As you can see, they don't have a lot of clothes. And the first thing that I thought about is, what if this was Zane and Bella? What if these were my kids, right? And I automatically kind of got filled with one of those E's, right? All this emotion. It's a different kind of family aspect than the one in California. These are people who are running for their lives. This is Yermain, who was one of the main subjects in the story that we ended up writing. And this is his family of, I think there were 5 of them. It was him, his wife, 2 young kids, and the wife's sister. And supposedly the wife's sister had a cousin that was in Canada already, and they believed that as long as they got over, that they would be okay. But what happens is there are these illegal, I don't want to say illegal, there's an economy that gets built out of some of this, right? So this guy in this black vest, his job every day is he comes to the mini mart and he charges people $100 to take them to the border. This was the last $100 that Yermain had. And the guy didn't want to take his money, and he said, you know, they've shut down Roxham Road. I don't want to take your money. You might want to spend that money to get your family some food until you figure out what you're going to do. Yermain was so desperate that he decided to chance it. So he gave him $80 because the guy gave him a discount. I guess he had a pumping heart for what that was. And he told me and Eddie, if you can keep up, you can follow me. And he proceeded to go about 120 miles to the border, and me and Eddie had to keep up and try to get these shots. It's very tough shooting in a situation like this. You never know when to, again, it's those feelings of, the last thing these people want right now is a camera in their face, right? But at the same time, I think that there are some people who understand what these images could do. And at the same time, you know, they had been through the Darien Gap to get here. I won't get into what that is, but I mean, their trek to get to America was already treacherous. So while I'm thinking the last thing they want is a camera in their face, they can really care less about my camera at that point, right? So this was a tough morning to go through this with this family and to feel their angst. This is the border right here where he dropped them off as they're literally walking across the border to give themselves up to the border agents, and just the look of this little girl of like, I don't even know if she knows what's going on right now. She's been on this long trip, it's cold, and she's just with mommy and daddy. And again, it was this push and pull between how close do you get, how much space do you give them. But these were some of the most heartfelt images that I took while I was there. I met some other people while I was there as well. It's a young man from Haiti who was fleeing because he thought that there were people in Haiti that were trying to kill him. He got to the mini mart and figured out that Canada wasn't going to be an option. So he decided to get in contact with a sister that he had in Orlando. And that's him FaceTiming his sister right there. I think his name was John Paul or something like that. But now he had to scramble up the money to try to get a bus back to Orlando. So we sat with him for a few hours while he was trying to figure it out. And he was really forthcoming. He talked to us about his story a lot. This gentleman right here is from Venezuela. And him and his brother were fleeing Venezuela because of violence, same thing. When they found out they couldn't get to Canada, next stop for them was going to be Chicago. And I'm really lucky that I was with Eddie. You know, Eddie is of Mexican descent from California. I kind of think the only reason why these subjects let us in, I hate to say it, is because we were black and brown people. Eddie spoke Spanish as a first language. So he was able to have full conversations with them. And I think once they saw that, they really opened up to us and let us into their world. I've never spent so much time in a mini mart in my life. It was like that movie Clerks. But hearing some of these stories, it reminds you why you do what you do. And sometimes, you know, the shot to go with is just the simple shot in these cases, just capturing their emotion, their faces, some of the scenes that are happening. During that same day, there was a woman from the Democratic Republic of Congo who came by herself. Same story, spent all her money to get there. She gets to this mini mart, she finds out Roxham Road is not an option, and she doesn't know what to do. And she was talking to a social worker who we had met at SUNY Plattsburgh the day before, who was trying to help her with her situation. And she didn't want to be interviewed because she was afraid. She was afraid about, you know, immigration and what that would mean for her. And I think I might have went to the bathroom. And when I came back out, I said, "Where'd the lady go?" And they said, "She just took off." And I'm like, "Where's she going?" I don't know. She was walking down the side of the highway. And when I walked down there and I see it, I'm like, "Oh, this is Carrie's shot." I hate to laugh about that because I hope this woman is okay, but I was able to get my long lens and basically get the shot that she wanted. This was the exact shot that she asked me if I could get. And it was the last shot that I took before I drove back to Rochester. So that was a lesson in patience. I love and hate it at the same time. I tried to get her in a way where you couldn't identify who she was to respect her wishes. But I do think the image, once you know the story behind it, is very telling of, you know, just not knowing what's next. I don't know where she was walking. It's a very rural area, but this is the shot that ended up being on the front of every story that the USA Today Network did on it. So it's interesting how things work in photography sometimes. It led to me and Eddie, you know, getting national headliner placing for the story, which was a pretty big deal. So it was a project that tested me emotionally, but it really progressed my career forward, and you know, I was happy to be able to be let into the lives of some of these folks. So that leads me to my last set of photos. So like I said, I worked at the Democratic Chronicle for about 5 years. I started as community reporter, then became city reporter, and then my last year I was editor of community news, which was a big promotion and gave me the opportunity to shape coverage, which I was really passionate about. But it also stopped me from writing and doing photography. And now I was working with younger reporters and trying to help them shape their vision. And I'm grateful for the experience that it gave me. And I loved it. But about a year in, it was too far off the path, right? Journalism was already jumping on one pad, and now becoming an editor just felt too administrative, and I really felt bad about it because DNC gave me an opportunity when nobody else wanted to. I was extremely loyal to the paper and to Mike because of that. It led to me becoming an adjunct professor at Nazareth University, teaching writing and photography. It led to all these other wonderful opportunities to get my photography out there, which led to, you know, me being here in a way, right? So I didn't know what life in Rochester was gonna be without the paper at that time, but I just knew that there was that creative kind of child that took those pictures of all those cars that was being suffocated by where I was. And for Christmas last year, I got a book from my niece called The Artist's Way by Julie, her last name escapes me. Oh, we know this book? Okay. And, you know, it talks a lot about reclaiming that creative child in there and the voices that we hear in our head about failure. You know, I'm not a real photographer, that thing, you know. But my favorite line in the book is "Leap and the net will appear." And I had a lot of conversations with friends about, am I making a mistake? I built this career, you know, it's just leaving it not the right thing. And, you know, the most consistent advice I got was leap and the net will appear. You'll know when it's right. So when I got that advice and I saw this line, I just knew it was time. And I didn't even really go looking for another job. I half filled out an application, and 3 days later I got a call about a content management position at a local nonprofit, which was comparable in salary and not a lot of time, maybe half the work. And I said, I think it's time. And I decided to leave the DNC in May. And since, there's just been so many opportunities that have popped up that have allowed me to return to be that artist that I think that I truly am. Julie, that book is amazing. And meeting Juliana and having her bring me into the fold here at Flower City is a part of a lot of those opportunities. And when we start talking about maybe doing some kind of exhibit here, what my next work was gonna be, I didn't know what that next step was gonna be. You know, like I said, I identify more as a father now. That's where a lot of my energy goes. And I didn't know how that was gonna mesh with my art. But what I decided was my new subjects were gonna be my kids and my family. So for the last couple months, I've been working on a new project. It's called Coming Home. And it is about the moment when I walk through the door and my kids yell, "Daddy," and then everything is playtime after that. And it's really amazing to witness because they exhibit that sandbox kind of mentality that I think we all have and we all want to be artists. And when I identified with that energy, I decided to just start capturing it. And what's different about this series is it's shot completely on film. So it's just a lot warmer. I started shooting on film maybe 2 years ago, and it was a big leap from digital because, you know, when you shoot digital, you can shoot thousands of photos and you can see what you got right and what you didn't get right. And the whole process of loading a roll of film, only having 37 shots, shooting, not knowing if you messed up or not, having to wait to see. In the beginning, it was just like, I don't have the patience for this. And those first couple rolls I shot, you know, I get a roll back, like I said, 37 exposures, maybe 2 of them look okay. A couple rolls I shot, I get back and they're like, you know what, we're not even gonna charge you for this. It's on us. Seriously, that's what Scott's told me about 2-3 times. So here I am again reinventing myself and trying to learn something new. And then one day my sister walks in the door. She says, "Hey, I was at a flea market," or "I something like that. I forget exactly what. I wonder, you know, I just saw this camera. I don't know if it works or not, but I thought of you, right? And I was at Scott's one day doing something else, and I just took it in there, and I'm like, hey man, my sister gave me this camera from a thrift shop, and the guy Josh, I don't know if anybody's ever been to Scott's, but you know, this guy Josh with glasses, he just starts going crazy. Oh my God, dude, where'd you get this? And it's got the motor on the side, and look, all you gotta do is spin this wheel and do this. And we talked for like 30 minutes about this camera, and my sister found, and I thought was junk. And it's the only thing that I've used for about 5 months now, and it allows me to get these just great images of the moments exactly when we come home. This is my daughter just, you know, finishing off her cereal on the right, and this is Zayd on the left at, I might as well pay rent to the Strong Play Museum because I'm there, it seems like every day. They call it the Elmo Museum, even though Sesame Street is probably the least amount of time that we spend there. It's still the Elmo Museum to them. But yeah, this is a preview of kind of what I'm working on right now. And just those moments, not anything perfect, not anything that is supposed to do anything but just evoke emotion. And I think it goes right back to, you know, California family, Northern Border family, Jazz Fest, extended family, you know, in a way. Protest footage, people, connections, and I think this is the thread that goes through all of my work, is the closeness that I try to capture, and it really just comes out of who I am, and like I said, father, son, brother, friend first, right? My work is really about connections and these threads that go through my life, and I might not know what I'm feeling, but I know I'm feeling something. And when I'm feeling that thing, you know, my go-to is to pick up the camera and just capture it. And, you know, these are the moments right now that I want to share with people. Because I think in the time that we live in, we can all use kind of this warm hug from grandma on a sunny day. So those are my pictures, that's my talk. One exciting thing is I am launching a Substack to continue kind of my published photography and writing work. I have these little forms right here. If you are feeling like being an artist yourself, if you write a little small moment from your life, you could be a part of the launch and have your story on the Substack. And if you leave your email address, I will subscribe you. So if you want to engage with what I got coming up soon, then no pressure, but the forums are here, and I would love to hear everybody's story here. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, by Rob Bell is usually where I post most of my stuff, and that's my talk. That's all I got for you. I don't know where Marcus is, but if you have any questions, I'm an open book. Sure.
Are you doing work as a gallerist as well? I mean, is that another project you've got going?
So, yes, I'm a co-curator at the Behind the Glass Gallery, which is down in Mercantile in Maine. I do that with Richard Colon, who is like more famous than I think the mayor here in Rochester. Everybody knows Richard. And Quadjay Donnell, who a lot of people know. So, you know, they started Behind the Glass Gallery. I was a part of the first 3 artists that showed there. And then they started pulling me on the podcast, and, you know, those are good friends, and they asked me to be a co-curator a couple months ago. Again, leap in the net will appear. You know, that happened right after I decided to leave the paper. So I'm doing that. I had an exhibition at AMFM Coffee back in February. I showed some work at an exhibit in Philly a couple of months ago, well, back in July, and might be having something here for people to see in a couple of months. So yeah.
I guess my question was more about, well, as a curator, how do you work with artists that are potentially going to show their work?
Sure. So the Behind the Glass Gallery is all about supporting underrepresented artists. So we like to focus on like everyday people who have a talent but maybe haven't had the chance to show their work, or maybe don't even believe that they are artists themselves. Like people who are at that stage that I was at, where you have this passion for something and you do something, but nobody has kind of validated that, and you are struggling with yourself to figure out whether or not this is who you are or what you want to do. So we like to find people who have never shown their work before, or have shown their work in very limited spaces, and just kind of give them a light and show them off. And it's amazing to see like a budding photographer. I mean, we do other mediums of art, but mostly photography. It's amazing to find somebody on like Instagram, and it's like, dude, like you're amazing. They're like, I only have 200 followers. I'm not anybody. We're like, well, we want you to be in the show. And then afterwards, they're like shooting all the time, and then they go on to do 2-3 other shows, and they're like, man, like Behind the Glass was that moment where, you know, I started to believe in myself. So it's amazing. I love it. The collaboration is top notch. Richard, who has actually an exhibit right here in this hallway called Community Over Competition, is huge on this concept of a tribe and bringing people together. And it's just all love at Behind the Glass. I love doing that every month. And yeah, I'm fortunate that they asked me to be a part of it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Really great talk.
Yep.
If I may add to your list of needs, I think the thing that I saw was empathy, which I think is really needed. And a balance between, respecting someone's privacy, but also telling their story and capturing that essence. Can you talk a little bit more about how you walk that balance?
Well, it's interesting. When I taught a digital street photography class here back in the spring, one of the students, Matt, asked me a question like, how do you just, like, what's the process of taking a photo of a stranger in the street? And I'm like, well, you really have to immerse yourself in that environment, I think, to be able to do it with empathy and ethically. So, to go back to the Daniel Prue thing, I remember covering it, and we were on Jefferson Avenue, and when I showed up, all of the demonstrators were on one side of the street, all the news cameras were on the other side of the street. And I'm like, well, that's dumb. And I'm like, what is this, a zoo? You know what I mean? So I walked across the street and went in the middle of everybody, and I think I just try to do that all the time, right? If there's somebody in a distressful situation, I try to be a person first. Hey, my name is Rob, this is why I'm here. How you doing today? What's going on? Before I just like stick a camera in their face. I think we've become so detached. We can do everything through these screens. We don't have to do anything. We can order groceries. I can get a pair of socks sent to me. I can have somebody pull up on a TaskRabbit, right? So I think people have sort of lost the art of like walking down the street and even saying hello to people. So sometimes it's just as simple as having a conversation with somebody who may seem like they're unapproachable or going through a way. But what I have noticed that is once you get past that barrier, people do want to share their stories, right? It's just about how you talk to them. It's just about how you show up. And a lot of times with these news stories, what I tried to do was not just show up when something was happening, right? Not just go to a neighborhood and say, hey, there are 1,000 people here, marching, and I'm gonna come down and shoot a couple photos, and I'm never coming back to Jefferson Avenue again. Like, no, let's go do another story. When the demonstration has passed, what about the candy store that's on this block? You know what I mean? So I think it's just really getting the idea out of your head that this is transactional, that the only value you have is a good picture for me. What's your name? I remember shooting Juneteenth Festival and getting everybody's phone number, and once I edited the photo, sending it to them. That's the least I can do. So I think that is how I try to approach it. Using the camera as a way to say, hey, now I know you, you know me, and that way it's more than just a cool photo op for me that I can put on Instagram, you know. So yeah. Any other questions? Marcus just left.
He's out there.
Oh, he's out there?
He's just
He just
hanging out
left.
there. So
Nah, I'm messing with him. I'm messing with him.
I don't know. I said we're at question time, and he was
All good, all good. All good. If that's it, then, you know, thank you.
I have a question,
Yeah.
not photo related.
Yep.
Can you just tell me about your podcast?
Oh, yeah. So I knew when I left the paper I didn't want to stop writing. But I needed some time to figure out what that next step was going to be. You know, media is in an interesting place right now. We all know what's going on, you know, with the federal cuts. The public media, you know, for-profit media is in bad shape. You know, one of the reasons why, you know, I kind of had to leave is just everything is kind of changing. I think Substack is a great platform right now for writers to kind of get their voices out there. But I just didn't want to create a platform that was just adding more noise to the conversation. I wanted to do something that was mindful, meditative, and something that could add, you know, a conversation kind of how we're having here today. So a lot of my articles are based around culture, mindfulness, what brings people calm, and they're meant to be, the way I picture it is a good conversation in a coffee shop. So the podcast is mostly lo-fi music, something that I make, something that I play for my students. We write in our journal. And every now and then I pop in with mindfulness advice and plan advice and things like that. But the Substack is really just gonna be kind of like the columns that I used to write for the paper. Just kind of my meditative notes of things that are happening in the world and culture and music. So yeah, it is full on rock. It's my photography, it's my essays. I try to keep everything between 300 and 400 words. And you know, I've got about 6-7 articles on there right now for the launch. And you know, I'll be writing about 2-3 a week going forward. So if you're interested in any more of my musings in my photography, then that's probably going to be the main source of it for now. So yeah.
Can you just speak more on the beat section?
Ah, man. So another one of my hobbies is I make music. I do like these lo-fi hip-hop beats. That's what I was doing at the coffee shop earlier this morning, so I have on these ridiculous running shorts. But it is another one of my passions, something that I don't broadcast a lot, but I wanted to integrate it into my writing in this way. So the podcast and the music is just kind of like the soundtrack for what I'm creating in other mediums. So yeah, I mean, lo-fi became big during the pandemic. People use it to study, to focus, to kind of chill out. So it just goes with my whole meditative mindfulness kind of theme. So yeah.
And the name of that?
Plants and Beats is, you know, the platform, and my stage name is Alofi when I do the music, so yeah. Yeah, like aloe plant and lo-fi. Yeah. Yeah. Cool, we good? All right. Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, one more thing. I told you, I am teaching a class this fall at Flower City Street Photography. When does it start? We just confirmed it. I think it'll be 6 weeks. It'll be 6 weeks on Saturday. It'll be 6 weeks on Saturday from 4 to 6. It's a chill class. I play like some classic movies. I had 3 students in my first class, which was cool because I usually teach college, and even though I had 3 students, they were way more attentive than my college students who just kind of like, we just here to get the credit. But I encourage, like, if you don't think you're a photographer, it's like not like that kind of class. I'm not about to, you know, go through ISO and all the technicalities. Like, if you only use your phone, that's cool. We talk a lot about process. We talk a lot about the state of mind that you put yourself in when you're looking to compose a shot out on the street. We talk a lot about how to talk to people when it's time to take photos of people. We go on photo walks, which are really fun. So if you're interested in street photography at all, it's a pretty cool class, I think.
Starts on October 18th.
October 18th.
Yeah, October 18th, 4 to 6.
4 to 6 on Saturday in this room. And yeah, if you're interested at all, you know, please join me. We'd love to see some of you. So yeah.
Thank you.
And that is it.